Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Today we're going to be organizing Ares Expedition, the Terraforming Mars card game, designed by Jacob Frixelius, Nick Little, and Sydney Engelstein, and published by Frix Games and Stronghold Games. This is a fully sleeved copy of Ares Expedition that's organized to get gameplay started as soon as possible with no lid lift, and includes all current content including promos, expansions, all the way up to Discovery, Foundations, and Crisis. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow, and for those of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. For links to everything that I talk about in this video, please take a look in the description, and if you have any questions about anything you see here, please let me know in the comments down below. Before we begin, I have three quick things I want to talk about, starting off with the playmats for the game. We use the monster protection tubes here for our small playmats. You can fit actually 2 playmats per tube, and I love the way that they're clear and you can clearly see what game it's for based on the artwork on that playmat. They're also not going to fit into this core box because it is chock full with all of your components. So for our playmats, we keep them in these tubes here. These are the monster protection. The second thing I want to talk about are the artwork sleeves that we use for our copy of the game. Now, these did come with the Kickstarter and have art that matches the backs of the cards, but if you're not using these, I do recommend that you use the Ultra Pro Matte Deck Protector sleeves. They're clear. I love the matte finish, the way that they shuffle. These are my go-to brand, and once again, I'll leave links in the description below. In addition, these art sleeves are not going to cover everything because there are 4 cards that come with the Crisis expansion that do require clear sleeves, so you will need to use some Ultra Pro Matte for that. In addition, there are some reference cards that will require tarot-sized card sleeves, and for those, I use the board game sleeves from Arcane Tinman. Once again, link in the description below. You're only going to actually need 6 of these, though. The last thing I want to talk about are the upgraded components and new trays, as well as redundant components in this new deluxe edition of Ares Expedition. We've actually are going to be using all of the trays from the old and the new, except for this one right here, and you'll see that as we go through the organization system. But we've also removed all of the redundant cards. These are things like duplicate cards with updated text. We've removed those and recycled them as they pretty much serve the same purpose and only have these minor changes that you can just ignore if you're playing with that expansion or not. We also are going to be using the entire extra set of cards from the Crisis additional deck, so you don't have to sort things out, and it does all fit in here without any lift. So that's everything before we begin. Let's go ahead and get started organizing Ares Expedition. Let's lift off the lid, and inside you'll see that we have all of our rulebooks on top. We've got our main game rulebook, followed by our quick start guide, and then all of your expansion rulebooks: Crisis, Foundations, Discovery, and then our new board. So we have our new replacement for the main game board. You've got double-sided feature here if you want to keep that original artwork, but the scoring here is a bit bigger, so it's easier to move stuff around. We also have the new Crisis boards, including the one that's going to hold all of your Crisis cards, and then this one that has the additional water threshold on the bottom here, also double-sided with different artwork. Next, we have our Foundations board here. If you're playing with that 6-player module, put that at the top of your main game board, and then you have an additional larger scoring area if you need it if you're playing with lots of players. This will help that early area where lots of people are in those same Terraform rating areas. In this upper right section, you'll have all of your reference cards, all tarot-sized. In this bottom right section, we have all of our Crisis components. Let's lift out the plastic lid, and you'll be using this when you decide to play with that Crisis module. It'll be the only one you need. You can ignore the other one that has the ocean as well as Greenery tokens, because those are only used in the non-Crisis mode. So this sort of serves as your replacement tray for that. Now, these first off have these global parameter tokens. You'll use them when you reach a certain negative threshold, either yellow or red here, and they'll give you additional negative conditions you have to deal with. Next, you have the Crisis tokens that will come on cards to serve as trackers. These new 1-point victory tokens that serve as substitutes to your Greenery when you decide to increase the oxygen and make those Greenery tokens. And also when you just play victory point cards, they're an additional resource you can spend. And then you have these new ocean tiles that are double-sided, so that way when you're flipping and unflipping them, you can make some plans based on what's on each side of those tiles. And then we've actually stored our replaced components from the original Ares Expedition in here as well. As mentioned before, I wanted this to be a sort of all-in box that you could open when you're playing Crisis, and so these serve a great purpose if you're not playing with that construction module. So that's everything here for the Crisis expansion. The last components in this bottom left corner consist of all of your different player color pieces. These are just square cubes that come in all different colors. Now, these are the 6 that you're going to find in your main game, but we've even added some purple cubes here just for some additional color options. I'll leave a link in the description below where you can get some customized colored cubes for yourself. There's a pencil in here in case you want to keep track of any of your progress on sticky notes or anything like that, and then a silica gel packet in here for freshness. Our next sets of components are organized in these random draw bags. You just open them up, and at the start of each game, if you're playing with the Discoveries, you'll be drawing 3 of these tokens here with your milestones and your awards. So they're separated into their own separate bags, so that way you have that randomized setup without having to put any tokens down, and you just pull out the 3 if that's what you're playing with. So you've got your milestones as well as your awards. Now these are Geek Up bags from the Board Game Geek store. I love the microfiber material that they use. It's easy to put your hand in there and pull out a couple of tokens. I love using these for all of my games that have these random draw pools. That way it's no additional setup for you. So that's everything on top of all of our cardwells. Let's go ahead and get into these cardwells, starting off with the middle section here. Two of these containers are going to be identical, holding all of your resource cubes. You've got your 1s, your 5s, and your 10s, and you'll place them onto different sides of the table. That way everybody has access to their resources. We've got our second resource container here, followed by our non-crisis container. Now, as mentioned before, if you are playing crisis mode, you've got your ocean tiles that are going to be completely replaced, as well as these 1-point markers that are going to replace all of your greenery tokens. So that is something to be aware of. They are separated for that reason. You also are going to store in here your 3 different markers, and those are for that main game board. If you're playing with the foundations, you'll need that extra one, but you'll have 3 for your main game board, your 5s, your 1s, and then your ocean tiles. And you can just shuffle these up and leave them in here, so that way when you're actually ready to draw an ocean token, they're already randomized, and you just reveal one. There's no need to actually put them on that main game board. Go ahead and sit this on the main game board if you're playing that multiplayer mode or anything that's non-crisis. And in this last resource container, you're going to have all of your miscellaneous tokens. Starting off with our tag tokens. These are if you play those wild tag symbols, you'll decide which of these you want to place on top of it. Your 3-point victory markers if you're playing with those milestones. And then lastly, your additional phase tokens. You can play these if you're playing with large player games. Generally in the small player games, we don't use them often, which is why they're stored in here. That's all of your miscellaneous tokens. So that's all of the different resource containers in that middle section here. Lastly, we have all of your card sets. We'll start with this middle section with all of your phase cards, and these are going to be organized by color. They've got the color of the different players in the back here, and these are going to be all of your phase cards separated into their normal as well as their upgraded side here. So you'll have those for the different players in that middle section. Much like our resource containers that are separated for base game and crisis, you also have your card sets that are specifically for base game and crisis. Now, there's a whole additional set of cards that have this special icon in the bottom that you can order, so that way you have 2 separate decks for crisis. And so we've gone ahead and done that so we don't have to do that annoying process of taking out specific cards if we want to switch between the different modes. So these are all of your crisis project cards, and then these are all of your standard game project cards. So they're going to be separated by these dividers here. For example, the crisis project cards, these are all your crisis project cards right here. Moving on this left side, you have the rest of your crisis cards. You have some crisis mode only corporations. You'll separate them there. Your crisis cards for a single player. That's going to include the crisis solo mode cards, those special phases with 2 different sides. And then you'll have the specific cards for the crisis that have the player count in the bottom. So like these are all the level 1, and you'll separate them by their tier as well. Like these are tier 2, there are tier 1, and there are also tier 0 cards if you want to play an easier game. Then you'll have your crisis dummy phase cards if you're playing with anything above 1 player. So that's all here. And then you'll have those cards that are specific for 2-player, marked with that 2 in the bottom. Same thing for 3-player, 4-player. And as mentioned before, you have those tier 0 cards if you'd like to use them. They're going to make the game a little bit easier by giving you 3 rounds where nothing happens, marked by that tier 0 in the bottom right corner. And then you also have these additional reference cards if you want to use them to give you the turn order for the crisis step. These are also listed on the board for the crisis game, so it's up to you if you want to use these. And on the back, they have references on what you need to remove. Now, this is an option if you don't want to get that extra set of cards on the left. You can just discard the cards if they have anything referring these different symbols, so specific requirements or milestones, things like that, or any of these specific cards. So if you don't want to have a separate set of cards, you can use these and just remove them as they come up. So that's totally an option as well. But that's everything on this left side for the crisis mode. And that brings us to our last section over here, all of your standard project cards, all of your corporations, and you will mix these in with those crisis specific corporations because you can play as any, but these are going to be usable for every single game on the right side here. Your project cards, as mentioned before, are going to include all of the expansion content. And then there are some additional tabs over here if you want to do any more segmentation, if you want to remove any specific types of cards, like things that use the upgraded phase cards or things with additional milestone effects. So if you don't want to play with anything there, you can remove them from this main section and tuck them behind these. I like playing with all this stuff, so I just leave it in here. Now, we did actually remove, though, some of the 5-player only cards. So these are cards that you're only going to use when you're playing with 5 or more players. And that includes one of the corporations here. This is one of the promos, Romira, so you can remove that unless you're playing with 5 or more players, and then all of the cards that have that 5+ symbol in the bottom right corner. So those will all be tucked behind that Project 5+ in this upper right corner. So that is everything inside of the box. Let's go ahead and pack it up. Let's start by putting all of our crisis cards away, starting off with the project cards, followed by the rest of our crisis cards, including the dummy cards, reference cards, and the different tier cards. Next up, we'll put all of these phase cards in the center section. And we'll finish off this bottom layer with all of your smaller token trays, including your Miscellaneous tray, as well as your Greenery and Standard Game Ocean tray. We'll go ahead and put those in the center there. And then we put in all of your resource cubes, stack them like so, and then just tuck them inside. We'll then place all of our player boards on the left side here, followed by all of your crisis mode tokens in this upper right. We'll put our reference cards in this upper left section, followed by our random draw bags in this bottom right section for all of your milestones and awards. We'll throw in a silica gel for freshness, as well as a pencil in this bottom right corner, followed by all of your different player components in their own small little bags. Next, we'll place our small board attachments in this bottom section, followed by your crisis boards as well as your main game board. We'll top it off with all of our rulebooks for the expansions as well as the base game. And that is organizing Ares Expedition, the Terraforming Mars card game. If you have any questions about what you saw here, please let me know down in the comments below. How do you organize your copy of Ares Expedition? What do you think of the new expansion content? Which is your favorite, Discovery, Foundations, or Crisis? Did you get the additional cards for the Crisis mode? We'd love to hear what you think. But thank you so much for watching. SideGame Strong.